5 friends met in Manhattan's private schools, rehearsed in cramped rooms for half a year, and hit a dive bar stage in 1999, igniting a storm that would reshape rock for a generation. The official story of the Strokes is all about overnight success, but the reality is messier, with early struggles, a last-minute manager's leap, and a sound shaped by both desperation and radical simplicity. Before the platinum records and British headlines, who really were these kids? And what secret risks set off the Strokes story that music history never saw coming? Julian Casablancas and Nikolai Fraiture met as children at the Lycée Français de New York, trading stories in French and English long before they ever traded bass lines and lyrics. That early bond became the foundation for everything that followed. By their teens, Julian was at Dwight School, where he crossed paths with Nick Valensi and Fabrizio Moretti. The three started playing music in borrowed classrooms and cramped apartments, chasing the sound of their heroes, and mostly trying to keep the noise down. Their shared late-night rehearsals were part apprenticeship and part experiment, a place to learn and to push limits. Albert Hammond Jr. entered the picture in 1998, fresh off a move from Los Angeles and a brief stint at a Swiss boarding school where he and Julian had been classmates. Within 2 weeks of arriving in New York, Albert was sharing an apartment with Julian, his guitar and suitcase barely unpacked before he was swept into the group. His background as the son of a chart-topping songwriter brought a melodic edge that blended with the band's raw energy. Most nights, the 5 squeezed into a rehearsal room at the Music Building in Midtown Manhattan. For 6 months, they played until their fingers ached, running through set after set, arguing over chord changes, and living off cheap takeout. Each member brought something different: Julian's restless drive, Nick's sharp guitar lines, Fab's rhythmic pulse, Nikolai's steady foundation, and Albert's knack for melody. The shared history was not just about geography or privilege. It was about the hours spent in those soundproofed rooms, learning to read each other's cues, pushing through mistakes, and finding a groove that felt like it belonged to all of them. By the time they were ready to step onto a stage, they were not just a group of friends, they were a band with a sound that could not have come from anywhere else. September 14, 1999. The Spiral's tiny back room pulsed with nerves as the Strokes stepped onto a stage for the first time under their new name. Word had spread among friends and a handful of curious locals, but the crowd was thin, just enough bodies to make the room feel alive, not enough to drown out every mistake. Julian gripped the mic, Nick and Albert traded glances, Fab counted them in, and Nikolai anchored the first notes. For 30 minutes, they tore through a set of originals, raw and unpolished, but unmistakably theirs. The set list, songs like Barely Legal and Last Night, hinted at something different from the city's usual fare. They finished sweaty and breathless, heads spinning, but the reaction was electric. That night, the band wasn't just playing for themselves anymore. Word about their energy traveled quickly across the Lower East Side. Within weeks, they were landing slots at Hi-Fi Bar and Luna Lounge, squeezing into vans with borrowed amps, chasing every chance to play. But it wasn't just the music that caught attention. Ryan Gentles, a booker at Mercury Lounge, saw something in their chemistry that went beyond the songs. Against all advice, Gentles left his steady job to become their manager, betting his career on a band with no record deal and barely a following. He hustled for gigs, handed out flyers, and started shaping their path from local hopefuls to a real act with business muscle behind them. His leap of faith gave the Strokes an edge in a scene crowded with bands and short on believers. As autumn turned to winter, their names started to show up on more bills, and their reputation in New York's club circuit began to take hold. A chance encounter at Luna Lounge set the next chapter in motion. After a late set in 2000, producer Gordon Raphael approached the band with an idea: to record at his basement studio Transporter ROM on East 2nd Street. The space was small, the gear basic, a handful of microphones, battered amps, and just enough tape to capture 3 songs. Undeterred, the Strokes jumped into a recording sprint. Over a few nights, they laid down The Modern Age, Last Night, and Barely Legal, working fast and lean. Julian pushed for vocals so saturated they had been run through a blown-out radio, a sound that felt immediate and slightly damaged. Gordon, drawn to their discipline and urgency, kept the setup minimal, no more than 11 tracks per song, mostly live takes, with every member playing together in the same cramped room. The chemistry was immediate. By the end of the session, they had a demo that felt raw and alive, a snapshot of downtown energy. That tape, pressed to acetate and slipped into the hands of Rough Trade in London, would soon travel farther than any of them expected. Pressed copies of the Modern Age demo landed at Rough Trade in London in January 2001, and the reaction was instant. Within days, the UK's NME posted an MP3 of Last Night on their website, introducing the Strokes to a new audience thousands of miles from Manhattan. British music writers latched onto the band's sharp, stripped-down sound, calling them the future of rock before most Americans even knew their name. The buzz grew louder with every review. Rough Trade distributed the EP in limited runs, and copies disappeared almost as quickly as they appeared in shops. Tastemakers and industry scouts crowded into tiny venues, hoping to catch a glimpse before the hype outpaced reality. By spring, the scramble to sign the Strokes became a full-blown bidding war. RCA, eager to secure the band for the United States, moved fast, offering the resources needed to make a full album. The band, still living out of suitcases and rehearsal rooms, now faced a new kind of pressure. The UK's embrace had raised expectations on both sides of the Atlantic, and the next step would demand more than just raw energy. Contracts were signed, plans set in motion, and the focus shifted to recording a debut that could live up to the noise. Transporter ROM Studio sat below street level on East 2nd Street, barely big enough for 5 people in their gear. Gordon Raphael, known for his ear and his thrift, set the rules from the start. No more than 11 tracks per song, no endless overdubs, no digital polish. The Strokes wanted to sound like a real band in a real room, not a studio creation. So they played together, live, with only the bare essentials, guitars, drums, bass, and a single organ here and there. Drum mics were rationed, just a Shure Beta 58 on the kick, a pair of SM57 microphones for the snare, and a single overhead compressed until the cymbals snapped but never washed out. The guitars, played by Nick Valensi and Albert Hammond Jr, were recorded clean and tight, with each note carefully balanced. Every decision came back to clarity, no unnecessary layers, no masking of mistakes. If something didn't work, they played it again, not fixed it later. Julian Casablancas' vocals ran through a battered PV practice amp and back into the board, creating a distorted, saturated effect that sounded like a pirate radio transmission. It was a deliberate move. Julian and Raphael pushed the preamps to the edge, chasing a sound that felt both immediate and slightly out of control. There were no doubled vocals, no stacks to hide behind. What you heard was what he sang, flaws and all. The 11-track limit wasn't just a technical constraint, it was a philosophy. While most bands at the time layered dozens of tracks, the Strokes insisted on discipline. If a part didn't earn its place, it was cut. Songs like Hard to Explain and Soma were pieced together more carefully, but even then, the arrangement stayed lean. The minimalism forced them to focus on interplay, how the drums locked with the bass, how the guitars danced around each other, how Julian's voice cut through the mix. Money was tight, but the band treated every session like a chance to prove that less could be more. The result was a sound that felt raw, but intentional, stripped of excess, and impossible to fake. In that cramped studio, with Raphael guiding and the band relentless in their pursuit, the Strokes turned constraint into identity, a record that sounded like 5 people in a room, playing for their lives. In August 2001, just as the first pressing of Is This It reached United Kingdom shelves, the band was still riding the high of their transatlantic breakthrough. But as the album's United States release approached, everything changed. The original cover, a black and white photograph by Colin Lane showing a gloved hand on a woman's bare hip, provoked instant debate in American offices. RCA, wary of retail backlash and the national mood, demanded a swap. The replacement was a swirling blue and yellow image of particle tracks from a bubble chamber. The band had little say. Overnight, the iconic sleeve disappeared from United States stores, fueling rumors and lending the record a forbidden aura. Press outlets latched on, spinning tales of censorship and rebellion, and the alternate cover became a collector's item before most fans had even seen the original. Then came the September 11th attacks. In the aftermath, RCA postponed the album's United States release by nearly a month and made a last-minute call. The track New York City Cops, with its taunting chorus, was pulled from the American version and swapped out for When It Started. The band understood, but the decision stung. For many, the song had captured the band's irreverent spirit, and it became a kind of underground anthem, circulating on import CDs and whispered about in fan forums. The changes only intensified the album's mystique. United Kingdom and European fans clung to their original pressings, while American listeners pieced together the missing elements through word of mouth, magazine clippings, and bootlegs. Critics debated whether the controversy helped or hurt, but the headlines kept coming. Is this? It was no longer just a debut, it was a flashpoint, shaped as much by outside forces as by the band's own choices. In the chaos, the Strokes found themselves at the center of a media storm. Their music refracted through headlines and rumor, their identity suddenly bigger than the songs themselves. Room on Fire appeared in 2003, with Gordon Raphael returning as producer. The Strokes stuck to their signature, tight guitars, brisk rhythms, and a dash of synth, especially on tracks like Reptilia. The album sharpened their sound without chasing trends, but some wondered if the band was playing it too safe. 3 years later, First Impressions of Earth arrived in 2006. The band pushed into heavier territory, stretching song lengths and experimenting with structure. David Kahn joined Raphael in the studio, and the result was darker and more restless. Songs like Juicebox and Ask Me Anything added keyboards and a sense of unease. The shift split fans and critics, but it signaled a refusal to stand still. Angles, released in 2011, reflected a band in flux. Recording sessions were scattered between New York and Los Angeles, with members often working separately. Joe Ciccarelli handled part of the production, and creative tension surfaced. The album blended pop hooks with layered synths and unpredictable turns, mirroring both growth and discord. Come Down Machine followed in 2013, leaning further into electronics and falsetto. The band kept promotion minimal as their RCA contract neared its end, but tracks like One Way Trigger still revealed their knack for melody. In 2020, The New Abnormal marked a fresh chapter. Working with Rick Rubin in Malibu, the band fused their classic interplay with synths, drum machines, and a sense of earned maturity, sounding both familiar and renewed. Across these albums, the Strokes showed a willingness to evolve, even when that evolution brought strain, division, and new creative direction. After years of moving as a single unit, the band's rhythm began to stutter. Side projects became both an outlet and a source of strain. Albert Hammond Jr. was the first to step out, releasing his debut solo album in 2006. His songs, shaped by a lifetime of melody from his father's songwriting legacy, explored ideas that did not always fit the Strokes' tight framework. These solo efforts brought him critical praise, but also forced the group to adjust to his growing independence. Julian Casablancas followed, launching The Voids in 2014. The Voids dove into experimental territory, with abrasive synths and sprawling arrangements that stood in sharp contrast to the Strokes' disciplined sound. Julian described the project as a way to push boundaries without compromise. But his attention divided, leaving the main band to navigate longer gaps between records and a new kind of uncertainty. Fabrizio Moretti found his own escape in Little Joy, a collaboration with Rodrigo Amarante and Binky Shapiro that drew on his Brazilian roots. The group's 2008 album traded the urgency of the Strokes for something breezier and more melodic, and traces of that rhythmic looseness later surfaced in his drumming back home. These creative detours were not just distractions, they changed how the band worked. Recording sessions became more fragmented, with members bringing outside influences and sometimes clashing over direction. The trust built in those early Manhattan rooms now had to stretch across continents and competing visions. For fans, the gaps between albums felt endless. For the band, they were a test of whether 5 distinct voices could still find harmony. July 14, 2001. The Bowery Ballroom's floor vibrated with every kick drum, sweat dripping from the ceiling as the Strokes powered through their set. Bootleg tapes from that night capture a band tearing through Take It or Leave It, and Last Night with a kind of reckless confidence, the crowd shouting every word back. That show became a touchstone, passed around on burned compact discs, dissected by fans who had not even seen the band live yet. Reviewers called it the moment New York's underground met the world. Months later, the Strokes hit national TV in the United States. Playing Last Night in a time slot usually reserved for safer acts, the performance was raw, almost confrontational, and it landed them in living rooms far beyond Manhattan. Suddenly, kids in the Midwest and across the Atlantic wanted to dress like them, play like them, start bands of their own. Within a year, their sound echoed through a new generation. Arctic Monkeys' Alex Turner called them the reason he picked up a guitar. The Killers, Franz Ferdinand, and Interpol all cited the Strokes as proof that tight hooks and sharp lyrics could still shake things up. Critics placed Is This It near the top of every decade end list, calling it a blueprint for modern rock. The Strokes were not just a New York story anymore, they were a spark, igniting scenes in every city with a basement and a borrowed amp. Today, the Strokes' raw sound still echoes in new bands and playlists worldwide, proof that rebellion can outlast its moment. As streaming rewrites music discovery, their influence shapes what listeners crave: authenticity over perfection. The legacy isn't nostalgia, it's a challenge. In a world of algorithms, genuine voices still break through. What comes next depends on who dares to pick up that thread. Share your thoughts below.